What is up, y'all? The Other Dude with John Alcorn here. If y'all don't really know who I am, I'm obviously the host of the show, The Other Dude with John Alcorn. Basically, obviously, like we all know, there's really no sports going on. I like to talk about upcoming Madden game or 2K game. Talk about past NFL players, kind of what eras of NFL they would last, maybe the 70s, 80s, 90s, potentially the early 2000s. Of course, when the draft ends, talk about some of the guys that were drafted and how they would work in the NFL with their teams. But before we get started, though, go check out on my Instagram, The Other Dude with John Alcorn, where I interview Rob Parker on Tuesday, and this Wednesday I just interviewed quarterback Carson Palmer. Thank y'all both so much for joining the show. Let's just really get started, though. As you see, though, in the title, what Tom Brady last playing football in the 1980s? I truly believe that he would, but let's think about this for a second. LaDainian Tomlinson literally ended Joe Theismann's career. Same kind of injury that Alex Smith had. Was Tom Brady able to handle the physicality of Lawrence Taylor? I truly believe that he could. Maybe. But what helps with Tom Brady is he's a pocket passing quarterback, quickly releasing the football to any offensive skill player, which would give him the best advantage. But how long would he play, though? That's another question. Would he play 20 years? Probably not. Would he have 6 rings? Probably not. I think he would have a ring or 2. But listen to this. I just thought of this. Jim Kelly and Tom Brady in a playoff game. Oh, boy. Jim Kelly versus Tom Brady, that would have been extremely interesting. Because you remember, in the 1980s, Bill Belichick was a coordinator for the New York Giants, who Lawrence Taylor was on that football team. We could think of other reasons why Tom Brady could last in the NFL in so many different ways in the 80s. Now, could he? Again, this is if, ands, or buts. We don't know. This is hypothetical scenarios. This is kind of the whole show today. Hypothetical scenarios and why I think and give my opinions why. Not just because he would throw for a bunch of yards. Why would he throw for a bunch of yards? Or whatever. When we see different quarterbacks from the 70s or 80s or 90s, what made some of them successful? Obviously, utilizing their skill set, quickly releasing the football in big moments to their offensive players, being that leader. Tom Brady would still have that leadership. Tom Brady would still, similarly to be the quarterback he would be. If Tom Brady played in the 80s, who knows at all what the NFL would be like nowadays? Probably, in my opinion, be a lot better. My team would probably be a little bit better. I don't know. But Tom Brady playing football in the 1980s, I think, is really interesting. But yet again, it is a hypothetical situation. Next topic, though, we are going to talk about today, though, is, I believe it's Bleacher Report came out with what we call a redraft of the 2001 NFL Draft. For these couple of picks, I'm going to give my thoughts on it, and let's just get really started there. I'm going to get it right here. The first pick. The Atlanta Falcons select quarterback Drew Brees, Purdue. To me, though, that is really interesting. If Drew Brees was selected by the Atlanta Falcons in 2001, would the Eagles have that kind of playoff dominance that they did? Would have they been in that Super Bowl in 2004, 2005? Would New England be in that Super Bowl? Where would Tom Brady have had success? Would the 49ers draft Alex Smith in the 2005 NFL Draft with the first overall pick? Would Colin Kaepernick be where he was for 2 years with the 49ers? Would Russell Wilson? All these different quarterbacks. It's a very interesting scenario here. Remember, the Atlanta Falcons had Rodney White and a couple other players they had on offense and defense. It wasn't necessarily a star-struck football team, but with Drew Brees' ability and his arm, this could have what it could have been. The first couple years of Michael Vick's career was electrifying. Who knows potentially what team Michael Vick would have gone to? Michael Vick did a lot for Virginia Tech. Drew Brees did a lot for Purdue. Drew Brees also played at Westlake in high school. When we look at Drew Brees' career and what we know now, and if he was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons in 2001, would that change the history of the NFL? I think it would. I'll explain why. Phillip Rivers was drafted by the same team couple of years later. Drew Brees gets released, that shoulder injury, does not go to Miami. That offseason in 2006, the New Orleans Saints signed Drew Brees. None of this would have happened if potentially Drew Brees gets drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. Drew Brees gets drafted by the Atlanta Falcons in this hypothetical redraft of the 2001 NFL Draft. Where does Phillip Rivers go? Does Eli Manning go to a different team? A lot of this could change. Does Aaron Rodgers go to the Packers? The 24th overall pick in the 2005 NFL Draft. A lot of this changes everything. Where would the Saints be as an organization? And if that happened, we're looking at 2020 now. Drew Brees, quarterback with the Atlanta Falcons. Who would be the quarterback? Would Teddy Bridgewater been drafted by the Vikings in 2014? Would Taysom Hill be on the New Orleans Saints? Would the 49ers kind of be where they'd be as an organization? A lot of times when we think about hypothetical situations for past or current veteran NFL players at whatever position, if they were drafted by certain teams, this would change the entire course in the NFL. Tom Brady, Drew Brees. Those two guys were drafted by two different teams or two different eras. This would change the entire course of the NFL. Maybe Tim Tebow doesn't get drafted by the Broncos. Maybe. All this is extremely hypothetical. That's what I love about this. We'll just never know, but I think it is very interesting here. Going to this next one, though. The second pick. Just 1 second. The Arizona Cardinals select LaDainian Tomlinson, LT, running back who won the MVP in 2006. To me, this would have been an interesting pick. Let's think about this, though, for a minute. If LaDainian Tomlinson goes to the Arizona Cardinals, would Josh McCown been on the Eagles last year? I couldn't imagine if he was selected by the Atlanta Falcons. Sorry, exactly. The Arizona Cardinals. I apologize. I can't imagine what team Larry Fitzgerald would have been on, or how many teams potentially Larry Fitzgerald would have been on. I think it is a very interesting thing here. We know what Larry Fitzgerald has done in his career. We get it. But this could have changed the entire course. Does Kurt Warner go to the Cardinals? Does Eli Manning get drafted by the Giants? A lot of it is just hypothetical, but I find it very interesting. But Kurt Warner wouldn't have been potentially with the Rams, what you call the greatest show on turf back in the day. A lot of that changes the entire course of the NFL. If we think about this, though, this next pick, though, we're going with the Cleveland Browns select Michael Vick. Before we really get into that, my thoughts on that, I find it very interesting, though. Would LT have had the career that he did? Would Geno Smith have been on the team with the Jets? Would the Jets have had those 2 runs with Sanchez and that defense? Would Rex Ryan have been on the Jets as the head coach? Probably not. So a lot of these hypothetical situations changes not just certain coaches' jobs, where certain players get drafted, where certain players get selected in this hypothetical 2001 NFL draft. I just find it extremely interesting, and I hope some true football fans really do too. Delicious. All right, the third pick, the Cleveland Browns select quarterback, Virginia Tech, Michael Vick. Now again, we know where certain players get drafted. I just find it very interesting as a football fan. But with the third overall pick, the Cleveland Browns select Michael Vick. And I think it is a very interesting situation here. We know what Michael Vick did the first couple years in the NFL. We know he was on the cover of Madden in 2004. When we look at Michael Vick's career, what Andy Reid had been with the Eagles, when Michael Vick signed there. If Michael Vick was drafted by the Cleveland Browns, I don't think he would have had some of the plays that he did. Because you look at the sack numbers when Tim Couch was the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, 30 plus, like again and again. Yes, Michael Vick was a running type quarterback. and maybe that the offensive line wouldn't have got exposed as much as they should have. But the fact of the matter is, Michael Vick's career wouldn't have been the exact same or similar if he was drafted by the Cleveland Browns. But I will say this, though. This is very interesting. The Cleveland Browns drafted Julio Jones in 2011. Traded to the Atlanta Falcons. In this hypothetical situation I thought of, if Michael Vick was drafted by the Cleveland Browns, would have been potentially, maybe, a veteran quarterback in Michael Vick, Julio Jones, and a young, potentially promising at the time, Trent Richardson, and Josh Cribbs at special teams, and then Josh Gordon. That could have been one of the greatest teams or trios of players that was never going to happen. I just find that very interesting there. With those type of skill players, what could have been, maybe. Again, the Cleveland Browns are still the Cleveland Browns. Would have Michael Vick have lasted there, or would he continue to be that, what do you call the quarterback carousel? Where would Tim Couch go? This effect where Drew Brees would have been in the draft. Where would Drew Brees have gone if Michael Vick was selected by this team, by the Cleveland Browns? Would Julio Jones have been drafted, or would Julio Jones been traded from the Browns to the Falcons? This could also affect where Larry Fitzgerald goes. Again, this also affects where Sam Bradford goes. This also affects where Kurt Warner could have gone. Or Kurt Warner, what if he been the continued starter for the Giants, where he fixes his injuries here? Where would Eli Manning go? Geno Smith. It's maybe a slunk of that. I'm really repeating myself here, but I think the situations are really interesting. Because this changes the entire course of the NFL. Would Tom Brady have his dominance? Would Michael Vick have an MVP like here? Who would have been on the Madden cover in 2004? A lot of things really changed there, and I find it very interesting, in my opinion, in every way, shape, or form. Though we're going to kind of go through some of these picks here. We're not going to go through all 31 here, because again, it's just not, I don't want to bore you there. The 7th overall pick, the Seattle Seahawks, from this hypothetical NFL draft, select Reggie Wayne. Oh, boy. Whew. Man. Reggie Wayne be on the Seattle Seahawks in this hypothetical 2001 redraft. I find it very interesting in a way, because Reggie Wayne, what he did with Peyton Manning. This could have changed the entire course of Tom Brady and Peyton Manning's career if Reggie Wayne was selected by the Seattle Seahawks in 2001. Would Peyton Manning have that dominance that he did in the AFC for 10 plus years before the neck injury in 2011? I don't know. Would Matt Hasselbeck have had a much better career? Maybe. Imagine this though. Potentially. Matt Hasselbeck, Reggie Wayne, beast mode. Those three players on one NFL team, I think, would have been very interesting. Now, would have had worked out and executed? Maybe. Probably not. I'm not sure. Again, this is all hypothetical situations here. Reggie Wayne's career, I believe Reggie Wayne is already in the Hall of Fame. Would Reggie Wayne have been in the Hall of Fame if he was picked by Seattle in 2001? I still think he would have, but he wouldn't have had the career that he did. Who would have been the dominant team in the AFC if he wasn't selected by the Seattle Seahawks? Who? Not sure. This could affect where Russell Wilson goes. Excuse me, I apologize. This would affect where Russell Wilson goes. So I find it very interesting here. A lot of these couple of players we're going to continue to talk about in this show, it really affects the entire course of the NFL. Not just Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Steve Smith, all these other players we can think of. It affects their career. Not necessarily in a positive or negative way, because we just don't know. But it's very hypothetical, but I find it very interesting, though. With this next pick, though, in this 2001 redraft, the Chicago Bears select Steve Smith. Ooh, man. That is very exciting in a hypothetical way. Jay Cutler was drafted by the Chicago Bears, I think, I can't remember, it was 2005, 2006, around that time. Imagine, Jay Cutler, Brandon Marshall, Steve Smith, a young, promising Matt Forte, Jared Allen on defense, Peanut Tillman or Charles Tillman on defense, those 6 players would have been such the interesting, one of the most interesting hypothetical teams in NFL history. But it was obviously never going to happen. To me, I'm curious though. Would Jay Cutler have had a better career? Maybe, maybe not. This next one though. Chad Johnson, aka Chad Ochocinco, would be drafted, by the San Francisco 49ers. Oh man, I love that hypothetical pick of the 2001 redraft. Alex Smith, if he was drafted by the San Francisco 49ers with the first overall pick. Alex Smith, Frank Gore, Chad Johnson. That is another interesting trio of players that was never going to happen, but still, in my opinion, I know I said the other one, but this one would be the most interesting trio of players that have never happened, but what could have been. I find that very interesting, though, there. Would Chad Johnson have the career that he did? Probably. Like I talked with Carson Palmer on this. You can go check out that interview on the Other Dude with John Alcorn Instagram page. He'd love playing with Chad Johnson. He said Chad Johnson was an amazing teammate. So would this have changed? Would Chad Johnson potentially gone to the Patriots for a year? Would the Patriots have had the dumbest that they did? Again, we just never know. But I find it very interesting how the 2001 draft would have been and how this could have changed pretty much everything we see in the NFL. Would have we saw that kind of Super Bowl we did in 2020? No. Would we saw the Super Bowl last year? No. Again, we just don't know. So I find it very exciting what could have been, but isn't going to be. So we look at these next couple picks here. We got Washington, blah, blah, blah. Some of these other ones we're going to go through that I find very interesting. Just for a second, we got Seattle. Leonard Davis, very interesting pick. Guard out of Texas. Kyle Van Boyce would have been very interesting, though, with the Detroit Lions. But, again, Detroit Lions don't know how to properly execute defensive players or basically make them play better. Santana Moss to the New York Jets. Oh, boy. That, I loved it. I love it. I think the Jets, though, with their unluck at quarterback, would Jada Smith have gone to the Jets? Would Michael Vick have gone there later in his career? I don't know, but I think Santana Moss to the Jets, that would have been interesting because you remember. I don't remember where he went, but Santana Moss, I believe, had a very good career in the NFL. You look at kind of like the Bengals here, a couple other teams, the Giants, of course, the Colts, the Saints. Dude, a lot of these are really interesting, though. Denver Broncos. Kind of talk about the Eagles a little bit. Some of these picks, guys, I'm not too familiar with, but I need to get familiar with because I'm getting more to know football. The Rams, interesting pick. The Giants, again, a lot of these picks, really all of these, really would change everything in the NFL as we know it. If the NFL worked out the way it did, I'm not sure. Maybe I would still been a Broncos fan. Who knows? Would Tony Romo have been drafted by the Dallas Cowboys? We just don't know in any way, shape, or form. I find it interesting, though. But let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. And this last topic, though. Michael Vick. Let's go back to Michael Vick for a minute. What Michael Vick? If Michael Vick wasn't drafted in 2001, what era of football, since football has started, would he be best at if he wasn't drafted and wasn't born in the years that he was? I think maybe the 80s. But actually, I take that back. That's 100% wrong. I think Michael Vick, in my opinion, I just messes up in my opinion. We make mistakes. I think Michael Vick, though, was in the perfect era when he was drafted. as a running type quarterback. I don't think he would have lasted in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, or 60s, or 50s because that physicality of football, being a running type quarterback, you're more apt to get hit. Because when a running type quarterback gets out of the pocket, you're a runner. You're no longer a quarterback. So I think he's more susceptible to that. Lawrence Taylor, he probably would have ended Michael Vick's career. But let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. This is the other dude with John Alcorn signing off. Have a good one. I will see y'all Monday with a brand new episode. Have a good one.